this morning?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Tissera, who is substituted by Councillor MacDonald, Paul Mitchell, Phil Mackey and Jenny Gibb.
Thank you, Emma. I'm Luann Grujon, I'm Chair of Aberdeen IJB, and for the purposes of people who may watch this meeting later, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves as they come to speak. So if people can try and remember that, just introduce yourself and your role on the IJB, that would be great. I'd like to start with my opening remarks today by paying tribute to the colleagues across health and social care in Aberdeen who contributed recently to the adverse weather and the flooding that we had over a weekend of 19th, 20th November. Police Scotland declared this as a major incident and the Grampian Local Resilience Partnership was activated. Aberdeen's Health and Social Care Partnership, in its role as a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies legislation, was at the heart of that response. I would like to pay tribute to the many staff who were involved, whether directly or indirectly, who helped ensure that some of our most vulnerable residents in the city stayed safe. Multi-agency preparations for further adverse weather events over winter are well underway, and the partnership is playing its role in these. I'd like to place on record my thanks to all our staff who are contributing and who will be on standby over the winter period to respond to any incidents as they arise. And also, now that we're almost in December and I am seeing Christmas trees going up, I do want to acknowledge that many of our teams across Aberdeen will be working right through the festive period, giving up time with their own families to look after other people. This is not something that we should take for granted and is deeply appreciated by myself and I'm sure by all the members of the IJB. So thanks to all our teams who will be working across the festive period to look after our citizens. Last Friday, on the 25th of November, the global annual 16 Days campaign started, which seeks to eliminate gender-based violence. I'm really delighted to see Aberdeen's Violence Against Women's Partnership's contribution to the campaign, with a number of different initiatives and events being held across the city. And in particular to note is the Women's Health and Wellbeing Fair, which has been held today and tomorrow at Pittodrie, hosted by our local partners. It's really great to see real partnership in action designed to reach women and families affected by gender-based violence. So thanks to all those involved in organising this and shining a light on this really important area. Final opening remarks I'd like to make. I just wanted to check if John Tomlinson had joined us yet. I don't think John's in the meeting yet.
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Are you there, John? Good.
I'm slightly late, slow link, but I'm here, yes.
Brilliant. Well, finally, in my opening remarks, John, I wanted to acknowledge that this will be your last meeting as a member of Aberdeen IJB. Many of you might be aware, John is moving on to the role of Vice Chair and Chair of Aberdeenshire IJB. John has brought great experience and wise counsel to Aberdeen IJB, and I'd like to, on behalf of us all, thank John for his significant contribution to Aberdeen IJB over the past few years. John, thank you very much. We will miss you, but we very much look forward to working with you in your new role. And I think everyone will agree with that. Lots of applause and thumbs up for you, John.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So now on to business parts. Do we have any declarations of interest, transparency statements from anyone? Just give folk a moment. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up for that. Okay, on the matter of exempt business, you'll see the supplementary work plan has some appendices which are considered commercially sensitive and therefore advised to be exempt. If members are content, what I propose to do is have as much of that discussion in public, but if anyone wants to get into specific questions that are contained in the appendices, we will go into private for those questions. Is everyone in agreement with that approach, first of all? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Great. Practicalities for today. So this meeting is scheduled from 10 till 2 p.m. I propose that we stop at midday for 30 minutes so we can have a proper break and stretch our legs and get something to eat, and we'll come back at 12:30. Emma, can you please advise when we're approaching that time and we can look at where we are on the agenda? That would be really helpful. Thank you. So now is the time, as we always do at the start, for us to put on our IJB goggles and to ground ourselves in our IJB work and the IJB world. You'll see on the agenda today, we've got a mixture of items which are partly about keeping the show on the road, thinking about our finance and our sustainability of existing services, but we're also taking steps forward in our strategic intent through, for example, our really important workforce plan. This morning, I'm delighted to share with you a short video showcasing the work of Horseback UK, one of the many local third sector partners who are doing really innovative work in the North East, out with what we would class as our traditional service land boundaries. We also chose Horseback UK today as a film, as it gives a real example of one of the many ways that staff working in health and care locally are being supported. So thanks to Jock Hutchison, Horseback UK, for making this film and for the valuable support they are providing across our communities. I'm going to hand over to Emma now to get the film up, and I hope you enjoy seeing a bit more about Horseback UK.
So here we are, and this is a typical day at Horseback. Today we have school kids here, and they're from a local school, and essentially they are kids who may be lacking a little confidence, who need a little time to just find themselves. COVID had a very bad effect on a lot of people, but I've got a daughter who is now 18, 19 years old, and the 2 years that she spent in isolation did a lot of damage, and I think other kids were affected similarly. So it's about helping kids to reconnect, get that confidence, so that they can take on the challenges that life throws at us. They're only on day 2 here, so essentially what they're doing at the moment is just getting to know the horses so that they're relaxed with them, because horses don't speak a lot of English, at least none of the ones I've met. And the truth is they feel what you feel, they feel the energy that you're giving off, and you have to get yourself into a calm place if you're going to work a horse. So kids are just one of the groups that we work with. We actually started off with the military. I was a Royal Marine officer for 10 years, and when we moved here we were going to breed horses, but I was made aware of young people coming back from Afghanistan with life-changing injuries, and we invited some of them up to have a look at the place just for a day out. And it became very apparent that there were 2 things the horses could give these people. The first is obvious, mobility with dignity. There was an awful lot of amputees in that group, but that really isn't what affected them most profoundly. What affected them most profoundly was, you know, doing the work on the ground, getting to know the horse, building the relationship, because these are extraordinary animals. As you can see, the relationship I've got with Del Boy is a very close one. He's one of my best friends. I've been working with him about a year, and like I said earlier, his future was not bright if he had not found a second career. And that's true for the people we serve in the military. We're trying to help them re-establish themselves in a world that they don't really know, because they've been part of a culture that they no longer can take part in. So that's the 2 groups, and we work with these groups still. We do most of the work here at the farm. We invite people, and I think that I hope you've got just a glimpse of the area that we're in. It is really God's country. It's the most beautiful place in the world to be. So it's not just the horses, it's reconnecting to nature. There's so many of us that spend our time indoors. We don't rarely go out. We spend our times looking at screens. And for me, there isn't any beauty on the screen. It's not real. Whereas when I'm out here in the wilds, if you like, with my best chum, then I'm experiencing the world maybe as the way it's supposed to be seen. So that's definitely a part of what goes on. The methodology we use is basic psychology, but it's also about teamwork. So what happens here is every day somebody learns a new pro word. His pro word for today is many. His pro word is, "I've got an itchy face, boss, do something about it." That's a good boy. So at the heart of it is, what do I need to be to work this horse? What do I need to do to get him to respect me? And the truth is, I have to be kind. So kindness is the first idea. And kindness doesn't mean to say I give him treats, because I'd never know if he loved me or Mr. Roundtree. Kindness means that I empathise with him. I understand he doesn't see the world the way that I do, and that I'm going to adapt so that he can be the best horse he can be. It's my job to make him that. I know you've heard it all before, mate. I know. The second thing is we want to teach people is patience. Any journey takes time. If things were easy, then there would be no satisfaction in them. If you're going to make yourself a better person, it takes time. It takes a bit of effort. You've got to be patient. If I'm going to make a horse, and we make horses, excuse me, rather than break them, using a methodology that's ancient, goes all the way back to ancient Greece, Xenophon, but it's about kindness and patience. The other thing we're looking for is belief. If you don't believe you're going to work the horse sure as heck is going to believe it. So how do I get that belief? Well, you're going to work, you're going to practice, you're going to learn, and that's going to give you confidence, and that's going to make you believe. And when you believe, the horse knows it, and he will trust you because he's essentially a flight animal, and anxiety is one of his friends. And what we try to do is to teach people how to manage that horse's anxiety, and in doing so, people learn about their own anxiety and how to manage it. The last group I want to mention is the NHS. For the last 2.5 years, we've worked with, he's really got a very itchy head today. We took what we developed when lockdown started and see if we could actually, affect people with horse behavior remotely by explaining ideas of human psychology and then looking at how those ideas affect a horse. This has proven to be highly successful. We're now rolling it out to NHS Grampian, and we start in the new year. We've done about 6 pilots up to now, so probably about 250 people have been through, and they've shown a real improvement in the Warwick scale, a real improvement. And we're very excited about this because at the heart of much of what we do, we've got mentors. And what we ask is people that have been through our courses actually become part of the team, because who better to lead you out the dark than somebody who's actually got out themselves. So mentoring, whether it's with the kids, and we've got kids who become mentors, whether it's the military, we've got military people who become mentors after going through the courses, or with the NHS. And again, we're empowering people within the NHS to take on the role so that the wellbeing programs that we run are sustainable. They're not just fire and forget. These are shifts in behavior so that people can actually manage stress, manage teams better. So I hope that gives you a rough insight into the work we do here at Horseback. I think most people think when they first hear the name that we somehow either rescue horses or retrain horses. It's not to do with that. What it's actually about is allowing the horse to teach us to be a better person, to be more empathetic, to be kinder, to be more patient. And that in itself, builds people up. And like I say already, we usually do it here, but we've also been doing it remotely. So we're now fairly confident we can affect more people. And in doing so, empower more people who would otherwise be at home watching Jeremy Kyle. So listen, thank you very much for listening. I hope that clarifies a little about our efforts here. I'm going to go and brush his nose. And if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. You can find our details. Del boy, come here, mate. You can find our details on the website, www.horseback.org.uk. There's a lot of info in there, including addresses. So if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and hope that gave you a good flavour of the work of Horseback UK. And I should point out that although Jock refers to NHS, the work that's been done locally has involved care homes, nursing teams, and they're currently developing shorter sessions for domestic and healthcare support workers. So quite a broad spectrum there. So we will now move on to the business of the agenda today. And if I can go to 4.2, which is the minute of the board meeting of 11th October. People who were there content with that as an accurate record of that meeting? Give people a moment. Yeah, I'm seeing people's heads nodding. Happy to take that as an accurate record, yeah. Do we have any matters arising that are not covered anywhere, or anything anybody wants to bring up from that minute? No. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. We'll move on then to 4.3, which is the draft minute of the Clinical Care Governance Committee, which is here just for noting. Kim, as the new chair of that committee, is there anything you wanted to highlight, or we're just happy to take questions or any comments today?
Yes, morning. I'm Kim Cruttenden. I'm IGB member and chair of clinical governance. The only thing that we really had to escalate, and I'm not sure that we've had an answer yet, was around an information governance excuse me, issue that had come up before and was still on our sort of action log. And Lynn Morrison was following that up with Fraser and Sandra, but I'm not quite sure if that happened yet, because really there hasn't been much time between clinical governance and this meeting, so it's okay if that's not the case, but that was the only thing we wanted to flag. Fraser,
Thanks,
I don't know
Kim.
if that did come to you.
Yeah, Fraser, do you have any update on us on that item for us?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, myself and Lynn have spoken since the meeting of the committee. So I'm aware the matter of information governance was raised at that chief exec team meeting. Just chatting to a couple of colleagues, where my colleagues are with NHS Grampian at the moment is they're developing an options appraisal to look at how we might make progress in the area of information governance. I intend to follow that up again with the data protection officer and just see if we can get an update on where matters are and what a timeline might look like in terms of at least producing that options appraisal to have a bit of a discussion around it, and also to offer any assistance that we can offer to help make progress in that area.
Okay, thank you, Fraser. It's good to see there's progress, and perhaps for the purpose of the minute, if we get that recorded, and that we would like to, we'll pick that up as a matter arising to get an update on the timelines, because yeah, we want to support that moving forward so that it's not a barrier to progress being made. So is that okay? Thank you, Fraser. Does anyone have any other comments or queries on the draft minute of the Clinical Care Governance Committee? No. Okay, right, so we will note that in the minute today. We'll now go to the business planner 4.4, which will be over to Fraser.
Thanks, Luann. You'll see there's 4 references to items being transferred today, so that's just a note to say that rather than have 4 separate items, we've consolidated them into the one report in respect of the various proposed procurement activities. The carer strategy has been deferred to January after the discussion at the last IGB meeting, so we can look forward to receiving that at the end of January. And then the last item, just at the top of page 18 of the agenda pack, relating to the local survey 2022, you'll see this proposal there to remove that for the reasons outlined in column J.
Thanks, Fraser. I'll open that up for any comments, or are people content to note that? Just give you a minute. People happy to note? Yeah. Okay, good. So no questions on that. Okay, so thank you, Fraser, and we'll get the planner updated accordingly. The next one is the seminar and workshops planner. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to highlight on that, Fraser.
Just to say it's a work in progress, continually getting new suggestions for seminars, which are welcome, and colleagues across senior leadership team working with yourself, Luann, and Emma, just constantly looking to try and identify suitable dates, taking into account some of the business that we've got coming through this board and the committee. So we'll continue to keep people up to date with any proposed dates for sessions that come through.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Fraser. I'm not seeing any hands up wanting to come in on that point. So yeah, work in progress. Good to see it developing. That's great. So our next item, 4.6, is Chief Officer's report, which is here for noting. Sandra will join us in a wee while. She's given evidence to the Health and Sport Committee at the moment. But such is her confidence in her team that and in Fraser and the team around, that we're happy just to take the Chief Officer's report now, and the team on the call will be able to answer any questions. Fraser, I don't know if you want to say anything by way of introduction or just open that up for questions on Sandra's report.
Yeah, just my thanks to Kay and the wider team. Very much a team effort pulling this report together, and hoping I can rely on their support too should there be any questions. Thanks.
Sandra, then you come.
Thank you very much, Luann. Very pleased to see some of the staff wellbeing arrangements that have been made, and you know, it's good to see, for example, stuff around winter, including personal alarms for staff who need to be out and about in the dark. I did wonder, though, and would like to ask around the wider issue, because it's all very well to have all these different issues for staff, but it's really the retention, the recruitment and retention of staff. And I just wondered, having heard and seen reports about that, if you could just give me a broad assurance that the work is ongoing on that aspect, because I think that's absolutely key to the health and well-being of all our staff, that we have people in place to do the work. Thanks.
Thanks, Sandra. Sandra, could you just introduce yourself, just for the
many
purpose of the
apologies.
recording?
Yeah, Councillor Sandra MacDonald, and IJB member today.
Thanks, Sandra. I see Sandy's put his hand up. Sandy, did you want to come in to answer Sandra's point?
Thank you, Luann. Is that okay, Fraser? I just carry on.
Go for it, Sandy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I wonder whether the best thing to do is just to hold that question until we review later on in the meeting the workforce plan, because retention and recruitment is part of that. I'm happy to explore it just now, but I wonder whether, to avoid duplicating, we might hold that till then.
I'm absolutely happy with that. I thought it was a really excellent report that we've coming up later on. I suppose it was just to make that point that it's it is a wider issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. We'll make sure we cover that in a bit of more detail when we come to 6.2 on the agenda. So I'll now go to John Cook and then John Tomlinson.
Thanks, Lauren. Yep, Councillor John Cook and Vice Chair of the IJB. Just a couple of quick questions. The reference to the link service tender, that's now in the public domain, is it not? I'll keep quiet if Fraser says no, don't tell him, it's secret. But I think the tender has been, the contract's been awarded, and we know who it is. Would it be worth just recording that in the minutes?
Thanks, John. I don't know if I've got a colleague on call who can assist with that one. No one jumping forward. Susie?
Hi, sorry, I couldn't get my button off. Yes, it has been awarded. So it's been awarded to Sam H. So that can be noted in the minute. I think a brief went out to IJB members, I think yesterday. So we can circulate that again if anyone's been missed.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to say who's got the award if it was still confidential, but thanks for that clarification. And I had one other very minor question, if I can find my annotations. Yeah, it's item 3.2, which is on pages 28, 29 of the pack. We've got the new duties under the new legislation to provide appropriate staffing. Presumably, and I guess this is a legal question, presumably if you have difficulties recruiting and you've got vacancies and you're advertising them and you just can't get anybody, there is a kind of a legal defence on that.
I can come in there if that helps, Chair. Yeah, I think you would apply the test of reasonableness, John. So as long as you can demonstrate you're making reasonable endeavours to put in place adequate staffing, I think that would protect us. But it's something for us to absolutely have due regard to, given that it's coming into legal effect now.
Thanks. That was all my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, John. John Tomlinson.
Thanks, Luann. John Tomlinson, member of the IJB. Yeah, my question is around page 27, so it's very helpful to get the update on long COVID. I'm just wanting clarification if that new funding and the approach covers the whole population, because I'm conscious that previously, earlier in the pandemic, the focus was on people coming out of hospital. So am I right now in reading that as it's now a whole population approach?
Thanks, John. I see Lynn Morrison's hands come up. Lynn, do you want to come in on that point?
Yes, and absolutely, John. This is a Grampian-wide approach that we're taking for the whole population. So you're right that there was some specific funding earlier on in the post-pandemic or during the pandemic around those who had been in hospital and pathways linked to that. But this is a much wider approach that we're taking with the funding that we've had allocated to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. And I'll go to Graham next. Graham Lawther.
Hello, yes, it's Graham Lawther here, Communications for the Partnership. Just for John Cook's reassurance and briefly back to the link practitioner contract, there'll be publicity going out about that this afternoon following this meeting. I thought I'd give the IJB the courtesy of allowing it to be raised at the IJB first before I put anything out. So that'll be going to the media and it'll be going on the website as well.
Thanks, Graham. That's good to have that clarified, and congratulations to Sam H for securing that contract. And I know there was a very robust process that went on behind that around the whole procurement. So well done to the team involved in that as well. Sandra MacDonald.
Thanks very much. On the following up from John Tomlinson's question around long COVID, is there a particular issue arising around access to respiratory wards and treatments and so on because of the nature of COVID, and how does that flow through, I guess? And I'm just also interested in, you know, the sort of ballpark numbers here, and also you know, if it's tends to be age specific, you know, just the cohort that is being helped.
Thank you, Sandra. I'm wondering if, well, Graham's hand's still up, but I think that's maybe previous. Lynn, did you want to come in? I'm recalling as well that we're having a report on this at the next Clinical Care Governance Committee, but I don't know if there's anything specifically you can share today to answer Sandra's question about, well, two questions there I heard. One about is it putting more people into the respiratory pathway of care, and what kind of numbers are we talking about? If you're able to shed any light on that, Lynn, at the moment.
So not by way of specifics, but I guess I was going to come in with the point that you were highlighting there, Luann, is that we know this will be an area of interest for the IJB and something that was discussed at the Clinical and Care Governance Committee. So I think probably helpful to make sure we include some of that data as part of that report to the committee, and then obviously that will feed up through into this group. It would be fair to say, I guess, that the main comment I would make is just the breadth of the presentation of what comes under the umbrella of long COVID, and what we're seeking to do with the funding that's been allocated to the board is around how we, partly as well, how we more fully understand what that demand is locally across our various health services and the pathways that people need to connect into, because the presentations are so variable. Clearly respiratory being one aspect of the symptoms that people may have, but there's such a broad range of those. And the other point maybe to highlight too is we are one of the few boards that at this stage have also been doing some planning and consideration around our children's implications for long COVID too. There's now a national group being set up to look at that aspect of long COVID, but that's something that we considered as part of our early planning, which is why part of our allocation is to try and again understand what those needs are, and to then build what are those pathways or connections that we need to make easier for people to access existing pathways of care within Grampian. So it's quite a complex picture, and I guess that's where we thought it might be helpful to try and describe some of that a bit more fully in that paper that we're intending to take to the back through the Clinical and Care Governance Committee. I don't know if that's helpful in the meantime.
Yeah, thank you very much. Through you, Chair, that is helpful. Of course, I'm not always on this committee, so maybe just maybe not as up to speed as some others, but it was certainly something that when I was reading, I did hone in on, and that's useful to look out for that in the future for papers. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandra. So I'm not seeing any other hands up. So if no one has further questions on the Chief Officer report, we'll note those questions, and we'll note that in the minute that we've considered Sandra's report. So now we'll move on to 5.1, which is the Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership Climate Change Project and Scottish Government reporting. Do we have Sophie? Yeah, hi Sophie. I've just by magic you've popped up on the screen. Sophie, do you want to introduce yourself and introduce this paper today? Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so hi, my name is Sophie Baya and I'm a Senior Project Manager in the Strategy and Transformation team of the Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership. The climate change report has two main components. The first component is the climate change report, Annex 2 of this report, which is an annual report on climate change duties the Scottish Government statutorily requires all public bodies to undertake. We have previously submitted reports until 2019, and those did not report on any climate change duties for the IJB specifically, but refer to reports of our parent bodies NHS Grampian and Aberdeen City Council. While our parent bodies continue to be responsible for the majority of climate change reporting, so for example, buildings, energy use, workforce or transport fleets, Scottish Government requirements have now increased, reflecting the fact that the Scottish Government has set itself a legally binding target to become net zero by 2045. Now, this is outlined in more detail in the letter from Scottish Government that you can find in Annex 1. The second component is a proposed climate change project that was developed as a result of a rapid scoping assessment to identify what, if any, responsibilities lie within the remit and scope of the IJB in light of those new reporting duties. The scoping found that there are indeed a number of areas where the IJB will have reporting duties going forward across both climate change mitigation and adaptation. A climate change oversight group was then created to oversee the further development and implementation of the proposed work. Currently, the proposed project has 3 work streams, but this may still develop a little bit further as more scoping is still required. The proposed work streams are awareness raising on climate change and, with the help of climate champions in particular, identify how we can integrate climate change considerations into our everyday work, and the provision of any training that may be required to enable this. The integration of climate change considerations into our commissioning and procurement is the second work stream, which includes working with those we commission to and procure from to develop a balanced approach that ensures both realistic targets for them while also meeting Scottish Government net zero targets. The third work stream focuses on integrating climate change considerations into business continuity and civil contingency arrangements of the IJB. The report makes 4 recommendations: to approve the attached climate change report, to instruct the Chief Officer to submit the climate change report to the Scottish Government by 30th of November, tomorrow, to approve the content and governance of the proposed climate change work, and to instruct the Chief Officer to bring an annual progress report on the climate change work to future October IJB meetings. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Sophie. I'll open that up, give people a moment. Christian.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Christian Arad, elected councillor in Aberdeen for the Tory and Fairhill and member of the board. I just wanted to have a clarification because Aberdeen has got inspiration to be net zero by 2037. I don't know if it is a way for the board to maybe put it as an aspiration, maybe saying that if it's, can we do it as earlier as possible, maybe to have maybe not a target of 2037, but you know, being open to the idea that as Aberdeen is looking to be a net zero city by 2037, but we might want to make an effort to reach that earlier than previous.
Sophie,
I can
do you want to
briefly,
come back? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be great. Where the challenge lies is that we are very much dependent on not only Aberdeen City targets, but also NHS Grampian, which is actually dependent on NHS Scotland targets, which are 2045. The other consideration we had, and John Cook actually got in touch with me prior to today's meeting as well to ask a very similar question. And one of the concerns we have is that, especially around what they call Scope 3 net zero targets, so indirect emissions, that's one of the most challenging emissions to first of all, to even understand, to collect, and to then bring down. And there we depend on third parties to bring those down. And we're just mindful that, especially with the ongoing crisis with energy prices and a lot of concerns that a lot of those third parties might have, is that we might be putting too much pressure on them if we're trying to push an earlier date, if that makes sense. But I'm happy to include an ambitious sort of an aim to try and do it earlier if possible.
I see Christian putting his hand up, putting his thumbs up. So maybe, Sophie, it's just about some wording about, that's the target, but if we can achieve it earlier, then that would be our ambition. But I suppose it's the balance of being realistic, but also being ambitious. So if that could be taken on board, that would be great. So I've got a couple of hands up. John Cook next, and then John Tomlinson.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, and just kind of following on from Christian's question and Sophie's helpful answer, I totally get the pressure that some folk may be under. When we're doing procurement exercises, would it be worth adding in a question on what are you doing on climate change when we are procuring from third parties? Not necessarily saying it should be a deal breaker, but just thinking it might be helpful. Do you think that would be appropriate?
Yeah, so that's something that we're planning to develop. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies. Yes, that's something that we're planning to develop, is to see what we can integrate into our, both for procurement and commissioning, as expectations. And the big question then is also, how much does the response to those questions regarding climate change then influence decision making? If there is, for example, tender and there's 2-3 interesting tenders, does a lower price trump climate change consideration? I think that's something that will need to be considered further, because they're tricky questions.
Yeah, I guess you'd need to do that on a case-by-case basis, and it'll be part art, part science. Just final comment rather than a question would be, when we're spending money on mitigating climate change, that's actually benefiting health, because climate change has an adverse impact on health. So it's kind of not one or t'other, it's complementary. That would be my final comment.
Thank you, John, and I think I see Sophie in agreement and on that final point. Yeah, John Tomlinson.
Okay, thank you, Luann. I preface this by acknowledging that my comments here might be extremely naive, so do come back and in that context. So will the board so we've got two points. Will the board in due course have a kind of figure of some sort which says here's the gap and then the progress against that down to net zero? So that's the first question. And then the second one picks up a bit from what John Cook was saying, is that the emissions of the people that we commission, are they our emissions or their emissions to take account of? And then, because so much is being done through our two key partners, the council and the health board, can you assure us that nothing falls in the gap there between them expecting us to do something and us expecting them to do something?
Thanks, John. Sophie, and you come?
Thanks. Those are really good comments, and actually some of the questions that I myself posed to Scottish Government, because some of this is not that clear. So we did include in the report a line that we need to identify against what year we actually becoming net zero, because you can only become net zero against a reference year, and these can be different. So that's something that we still need to figure out, and I think in particular a little bit difficult with an organisation that effectively only existed since 2016. So that's something we'll need to do and then work towards that. In terms of the Scope 3 emissions, the indirect emissions, so that's definitely a very tricky question, because we are expecting that Scottish Government in the long term or in the medium term will expect third parties as well to report, and then the question is, well, then that's their emissions rather than our emissions. But currently, as this stands, this is our indirect emissions. So indirect emissions really refers to anything that relates to us, anything that we finance, anything that we fund, but that we don't have direct control over. So we don't turn the heating on or off. We don't have these direct impacts. But what are indirect emissions through that? So they are ours for the time being. That's all I can say. And my apologies, I think I've missed a little bit the last question. I wasn't completely sure.
Sorry, it ended up a third question, so I was right. It's just being assured that things don't fall between ourselves and the council and the health board in terms of who's expecting who to do what.
Right. Yes, and you're absolutely right, and that's one of the reasons why we set up the climate change oversight group. So on that group, we have representatives from the senior leadership team of the partnership, but also climate change leadership roles from both NHS Grampian and Aberdeen City Council. So this is how we're hoping to make sure we make sure basically that they have oversight and they inform us on, they make sure that we don't have anything falling through the gaps, as you say.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. I think it's really helpful just as we get our head around what it is that we try to have oversight of. So thank you.
Thanks, John. And sounds like not naive questions, just difficult questions with no easy answers at this stage, but definitely sounds like they're on the radar and they're being looked at. It may be in due course that it might be a helpful thing for this IJB to have a session on how, the work around climate change and how particularly we're working with our commission sector to enable all those actions to be taken in a way that's co-produced with our partners, rather than something that we're using as a negative thing. But actually, I think it could be a real positive thing and would build on our approach to ethical commissioning that we're already doing in Aberdeen City. So maybe just to hold that as something for a possible future seminar for this IJB. It's such an important area for us all. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so if we are content with that, we'll go to the recommendations, which are in the pack on page 31. So there's 4 recommendations. We're approving the climate change report. We're instructing the Chief Officer to report to the Scottish Government on our climate change report. We're approving the content and the governance of the climate change project for 22 to 25, and we're instructing the Chief Officer to bring an annual progress report on the climate change work to future October IJB meetings. Are we all happy with that? Yeah, good. That's great. Okay, well, we'll agree those recommendations and we'll note some of that discussion in the minute as well. So thank you, Sophie, and for all the work that's going on behind the scenes on this. Thank you. And I see Sandra has joined us, Sandra McLeod. I don't know if you've just joined us or I just see you on the screen. So welcome, Sandra. Good to have you with us. Your team did a grand job on your Chief Officer report. So as you knew they would. So our next item is 6.1, which is the Q2 financial monitoring update. I think Fraser's going to be introducing that report today. So over to you, Fraser.
Yeah, thanks, Luann. And conscious I didn't introduce myself previously, Interim Chief Operating Officer, not your Chief Finance Officer. Paul had to put in his apologies today. So this report provides an update on the revenue budget performance for Q2, so as at the 30th of September 2022. You'll see that we're on course as a partnership to balance our budget for 22-23. But arrangements are, of course, in place to closely monitor that through to the end of the financial year. At the last meeting, we had some discussion around the Scottish Government's approach to reclaiming any undercommitted COVID reserve. Since the last meeting, there's been no substantive update on that, so we've had no direct or formal direction from the Scottish Government since their initial letter that we received a number of weeks ago. Questions have been raised through the Chief Finance Officer's executive group on what basis the Scottish Government are looking for the repayment of the monies. These discussions are continuing, but of course we'll continue to keep members around the table up to date with any substantive progress that's made in that regard. I'm happy to take any questions, Luann.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open that up now for colleagues to ask any questions. Christian.
Yes, thanks very much, Anne. Yeah, I do remember there were an intention to reclaim the surplus COVID reserves from the IGBs, but it had it as well. There were an expectation that all those reserves would have been utilized in full in 2022-2023. I just wanted to know, are we going to fulfill that expectation? Is there any way that we can, to clear up that issue, can we find a way to allocate that funding before the end of March next year?
Thanks, Christian. Thanks. Fraser?
Thanks, Luann. The issue we've got is that the criteria for using that fund is quite tight. And of course, the further that we move on from, if you like, the heart of the pandemic, the more challenging it is to find expenditure that complies with that criteria. So it might not actually be the case that we're able to exhaust that reserve fund, if you like, Christian. But if the opportunities do come our way that we believe could meet the criteria, then of course we would look to take advantage of that.
Thanks very much, Vice President. Would it be possible maybe to ask for that flexibility, that, you know, having some ideas of where we can allocate that funding? I think that would make a lot of sense. I'm sure that, you know, us and the Scottish Government doesn't want to have that money lying on the COVID after March. So if we could ask for some of that flexibility and some ideas of where we could allocate that money, that would be helpful.
Yes, certainly happy to take that on board. As you'd imagine, Paul, is our CFO, is looking to maximise the flexibility within the criteria we've got. I'll certainly reflect your comments and see if there's a way of opening that dialogue with the Scottish Government. I think it's also worth pointing out, I think Paul pointed this out at the last meeting, that what the government is looking to do is trying to allocate the resource to places of need within the wider system. So it's not so much the money's been pulled away to be necessarily taken out of the system. It's looking to how to make best use of the available resource within the system. So I'm not entirely confident that we would get increased flexibility, but more than happy to look to reflect that in the ongoing discussions.
Thank you. Move to Alison Murray for the next question. Alison.
Hi, thanks. I'm Alison Murray, the carer representative on the board. I was just wondering, it's probably something we might have to discuss offline, but how is carer funding represented in the budget? Because I wasn't sure. I could see 1 or 2 places which might have included it, but it wasn't quite clear how it all sits. So, you know, it's how it's split up between all the different budgets.
Fraser, is that something that's an easy answer, or maybe something to take offline?
Luann, it's probably not an easy answer for me, but it would be an easier answer for Paul. So if Alison's okay, certainly take a note to take that away, and we can maybe look to give her an insight into that.
That'd be good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Alison. Martin Gregg.
Yeah, thank you. Martin Gregg, a member of Aberdeen City Council. It's really a question, I think it's more about policy. There's a section on transformation, which is obviously an important part of budget consideration. And there's mention there of social prescribing. and I think that in the long term, that's an area that we would want to look at in order to maximise spend and to make best use of resources, particularly in rethinking, reorganising primary care options. But I know that social prescribing is it's highly complex. There is resistance. Building up an evidence base is challenging. I think that film that we saw was a really excellent example of what can be done. But I think there are clearly economic benefits in the long term, and I just wondered if that's an area that is being considered through the financial strategy. Obviously not medium, but long-term financial planning.
Thanks, Luann. It absolutely is, and you know that's part of the vision, I think, of our strategic plan, and that's what the delivery plan is looking to try and achieve over the next 2 to 3 years. At the next IGB, or perhaps the one after that, we'll have the medium-term financial framework coming up to the IGB for members' consideration, and that will look to try and tie up what we see as the financial challenge and then over the next 5 years, and how the delivery plan, the IGB's delivery plan, will seek to address that challenge through transformational activity, such as increasing the approach of social prescribing.
Yeah, thanks very much. If I can just come back, it is an area which depends on building up relationships and partnerships with a very wide range of potential organisations. There was the sport and horse riding and so forth. It will take a lot of time and a lot of effort. So I'm imagining that thought is being given to help us to move towards that culture shift. I mean, it is happening, but it will help us to move away from that reliance on GPs, and it does involve convincing, persuading the public that there are other more effective ways towards healing. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. And you make a very good point, and I think it does touch on a culture shift and how we change expectations for the public about how they can contribute to good health as well. So really important, and yeah, we'll be looking for it in our medium-term financial strategy. And of course, SAMH, the Links Worker project that we just heard about today, is a key part of that as well. So yeah, lots of work already going on, but lots more to do for sure. Thank you for that, Martin. I will now go to, I've lost my numbers on the screen. So we've got John Cook and then John Tomlinson.
Thanks, Luann. I totally agree with what Martin said on social prescribing. I was going to ask on that, but he's covered it far more eloquently than I could have done. Just on medicines, drugs prescribing, I think when we've looked at this before, and it's an area that it's very, very difficult to budget, because you don't know who's going to walk through the door presenting with a condition in front of a GP, which is part of the issue. Part of the issue is prices fluctuate. But from previous discussions on this, would it be fair to say that in Aberdeen we are pretty good compared to the national average on things like generic prescribing and not prescribing things of limited clinical value? Is that, I think that's been the case in the past, but still fair to say that?
Luann, I can see Sandra nodding her head, so I'll maybe invite her to come in there.
Okay, thanks, Luann. John, yes, absolutely. We've reviewed that. We're in a good position locally. I think you've reflected the circumstance locally very well. It is a very an area which is quite volatile at times, and I think, as the paper highlights, it's subject to volume price increases, as well as, you know, our population as they're progressing and needing more medication things. But everything has been done locally to minimise that, and we are in a good position as can be.
Thanks, that's reassuring to know.
Thank you, John. Move on to John Tomlinson.
Okay, thank you. Yes, on page 75 of the pack, there's reference there to current financial position being dependent on vacancy levels. And that was one particular part of the risk around community health services, but it's probably a general point, and it links to previous item, which was about the Staffing Act, and then the next item, which is on the workforce. And Fraser, you helpfully said the test of reasonableness in terms of, being able to meet what the Act says. We also have to meet our financial envelope, work within our resources. So striving to make savings by not having staff, would that be deemed, do you think, reasonable in the circumstances?
John with another lovely question. I think it's all about getting balance at the end of the day. So, the operating environment in which we operate in is completely changing. We as an organisation have to change with that too. We need to try and operate smartly, as we all know, and we've got advances in technology, etc., that we can look to take advantage of. That might lead to a more efficient and effective service, particularly if the available workforce is reducing in number. So I don't think we should necessarily just look at let's reduce the levels of staffing so that we can balance a budget. It's about having a look at what is the need of the population, and then looking at how we best use the existing resource that we've got. Some of that will be for staff, some of that might be investment in technology, some of that might be investing in transformation so that we can operate in a more efficient manner in the longer term.
Thanks, Fraser. Mike, I see Mike's hand up. Mike, do you want to come in on this point? If you introduce yourself at the start, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Luan. Mike Adams, full-time partnership rep for NHS Grampian. Fraser, you're very, very eloquent in giving your answer to John. John, my answer is much simpler. The answer is no. It is not. And that will be stuff that we will probably speak about in the next items. So I just thought I'd give you, the shorter, sharper, but far less eloquent than Fraser could do.
Thanks, Mike. I'm not seeing any other hands up at the moment. Are people content? Got their questions asked on this item. Okay, so we'll go to the recommendations, which are on page 62. So we're being asked to note this report in relation to the IGB budget and the information on areas of risk and management action that are contained, and approve the budget variants indicated in Appendix F. I think it's probably also worth noting in the minute, and people who know me well know that I like to close the loop. So just to note that we realise there's a lot of uncertainty still around the finance, and this will be on the RAPC agenda for a further look in early 2023, so that we're keeping a close eye on the financial position as this develops and as we know more. So we'll make sure that that's covered in the minute as well, because this is obviously critically important for us. So thank you. We'll note that, and we're all happy with those recommendations. Okay, good. So we'll now go on to our next item, which is 6.2, the workforce plan. Who do we have today introducing this? Is it Stuart? Stuart, you have magically appeared on my screen, so I'll hand over to you to introduce the workforce plan.
Thank you, Lan. Yes, I'm hoping I'll get away with the introduction and Sandy can answer all the questions, but we'll see. My name's Stuart Lambert and I'm a Transformation Programme Manager, part of the Strategy and Transformation team. So good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to bring forward the final version of the Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership Workforce Plan that runs from 2022 to 2025, and this is part of our wider strategic plan. The IJB saw the first draft at the end of August this year, which is linked in the covering report and sets out the context and background, and obviously what we were required to cover in the workforce plan. As you can imagine, since then a lot has happened, and the version you see today is the result of the previous month's hard work from everyone involved in the working group and indeed beyond that. Over the past couple of months, we've received feedback from the Scottish Government who are really positive about how clear we are on our aims and intentions over the next 3 years, and indeed the structure and presentation of the plan itself. One area they did highlight were the data sections at the beginning of the plan, to have a little bit more narrative around these, so it reads less as a statistical readout. So to that end, we've made significant changes to those sections to include more of the narrative and button links showing the correlation of the data points and how these have informed our priorities moving forward. So for example, when we introduce data on information on sickness or the diversity of our workforce, there are direct links on those pages taking you straight to our aims and actions surrounding these when we look at things like employability pathways from schools and further work on accessing international recruits. Also in that time, we've had feedback from the wider staff consultation, which included our adult protection colleagues, senior leaders across all organisations and staff in the front line. And we also had a very productive joint session between the senior leadership team and the operational leadership teams on the 5th of October. This resulted in us submitting over 7 pages of wording amendments, updates and formatting changes. And this kind of includes the graphics of the plan, which now, hopefully, as you can see, has a fresh social care input and focus as well. I think the previous version had more of a clinical focus in terms of the pictures used and some of the descriptions. As the covering report highlights, the most significant changes have been the inclusion of data and support and information from Commission and independent services to ensure the plans as reflective as possible across all the services in the partnership. A review of the actions refined under the key priorities, better linkage between the data and what the information tells us, which I've just covered, and our alignment to the ACC Workforce and Development, NHSG Plan for the Future, and of course our Strategic Plan and Risk Register. One of the biggest challenges we've came across in pulling this plan together has been covering the vast array of services under the umbrella of the partnership. Including information from one area may look totally different to another, so we've tried to bring everything we can into the plan under the instructions we were given from the IJB and Scottish Government. And with that in mind, we've included as much detail as we have available and as we can in relation to our aims and some of our key actions. And I would highlight that the covering report now includes more detail on the responsibilities of the delivery group over the coming years as we gather more information and develop these further. Our priorities are set out under the key themes of recruitment and retention, which has already been mentioned today, mental health and well-being, and growth and development opportunities, and these directly contribute to mitigating the risks identified under workforce in our strategic risk register. Finally, I would just like to thank everyone in the working group for all the hard work and all those who have helped give feedback to help shape this workforce plan. It's been very much appreciated. Sandy and I are happy to take any questions, and I'm both delighted and indeed relieved that we have Michelle Grant here with us who can help answer any specific data questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. It's a really helpful introduction. I'll just give people a moment to consider their questions. I know there will be comments and feedback on this. It's such an important enabler for our strategy. So a number of hands going up. Go to Kim first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Excuse me, I do hope this wasn't covered because I quickly had to answer the door to the window cleaner. So, I do hope you didn't say. I just wanted to ask. I know in my experience from my role, what we consider a kind of normal turnover of staff to be a sort of percentage, and I just wondered if what the normal is considered to be, because I noticed there's quite a bit of variation depending on which area people work in, and I also wondered that the staff feedback that's in here. Is that feedback from staff who are currently employed, or is it feedback from staff we've left, such as exit interviews? And if it's not exit interviews, do we routinely do those for staff, just so there's learning there? Just those 2 questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Stuart,
do you want to answer that?
I can answer the second part. I think Sandy might be able to answer the first part. So the feedback is from staff who are currently employed. If you see that on page, I think it's page 15 of the report, and that's helped influence and identify our priorities moving forward, Kim. So that is from currently employed. But I think the other one I'll maybe hand over to Sandy because I see he's got his hand up.
Thank you. I think, I mean, every organisation turnover will be different, but I think my memory just now is thinking probably 10% was seen to be a kind of reasonable, not kind of an average, if I can put it in those terms. And clearly there's a difference between the, and I think 15% is the short answer is it's too high. If a sixth of our people are turning over in that period, clearly that is too high. And so that would be the kind of the short answer come to that.
Okay, no, thanks for that. And do we do exit interviews for people then routinely, or even for certain grades or groups if there's an issue? Is that something that happens?
I see in the chat that Mike has put in that exit interviews should always be available when people agree to do that. Would that be the case?
That's how it's supposed to be. If somebody's agreeable, because it's up to them that way, there should always be an exit interview.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I see Sandra's got her hand up. Sandra, did you want to come in on that point or on those questions?
And just on those questions, Luann, thank you. Just to say that we would follow, as you'll be aware, Kim, our staff are employed either through ACC or NHSG, so we follow their recruitment and processes. So absolutely, there's exit interviews with both of those as formal processes. And with regards to the retention rates, I think historically, and there has been quite a significant number of papers that have been done in the past, social care does tend to have higher turnover rates. And I think that's and with regards to historically is there, particularly within our private sector. I think if you look at within some of the data within the paper, particularly about our providers, they look as if they've got fairly high levels of turnover. That's not unusual in that sector. So I think that although as Sandy, I would absolutely agree with them that there is a variance about what that looks like, and it's far better for us to focus on retaining staff than recruiting, than having to continually fill vacancies. We are conscious that there are some other indicators about where and how we manage that turnover.
Thanks, Sandra. That's really helpful to give that clarity that it's not a one size fits all by any means. Yeah. So number of hands up now. We'll go to Martin Gregg next.
Yeah, thanks, Luann. I think that balance of achieving that right balance of the workforce is a very considerable challenge, particularly when you note the major growth in health needs that are being forecast within the report. I mean, there's also mention of unmet needs. There is a net increase in staffing levels that's mentioned, but it does fluctuate, and maybe that's because of the churn of turnover. Bonaccord Care also has seen a bit of a dip, I think, in 2021. So really, the question is how to sustain that onward that upward trajectory in staffing levels. I thought the feedback was especially helpful. Overall, staff said that they felt that it was a good place to work. There was mention of, I mean, there were kind of requests for training, more training opportunities on the job. People felt supported, but there was, requests for more support and for realistic workloads. So I'm just wondering, within all of that feedback, is there some information there that can help to ensure that we're encouraging the upward movement in recruiting and retaining staff, so that it's a percentage increase each year? Yeah.
Thanks, Martin. I see Sandy's hand up. So Sandy, did you want to come in on that? Sort of 2 points, really. One, what are we overall doing to get that increase in trajectory of staff numbers, and how are we using the feedback that we've got to improve people's experience of being at work?
Thank you, Luann. And several times I forgot to say I'm Sandy Reid, the lead for people in organisations, so my apologies for kind of forgetting to say that. I think one of the things that really comes to mind, it was mentioned earlier, I think retention has to become, Sandra's just touched on it as well, retention has to become an ever higher priority for us as an organisation. And that's complex. I mean, we don't employ anybody, apart from, I think, the chief officer, apart from the chief officer, we don't employ anybody else. So we're not the employer. We don't award people's pay. That's not us either. So you can see some of the main levers that what employers would have, we don't have. So the kind of things I think that we're starting to get a lot of feedback from staff about, which would relate to, people feel if they feel valued or not, they're more likely to stay in an organisation. If they feel listened to and supported or not, they're more likely or not to remain in an organisation. I think one of the things that there's been a nice example recently. I'm not sure if Alison McLeod's on the call, but giving people career pathways. I always get really frustrated if people think there aren't career pathways within a very big organisation with 2,000 staff. So highlighting those career pathways, and some of Alison's team have recently been promoted and moved into positions that were very difficult to recruit to. So that's a good example of that. And supporting staff's well-being, and well-being will be different for every 2,000 members of staff. They'll have 2,000 different versions of what supporting their well-being means, but trying to reach out and get as much of that information as possible. And I think smarter working, we're starting to do, there's mention in the kind of action plan towards the end around induction sessions. So we've held 3 of these relatively recently with our new recruits, and quite a lot of them, when you ask them what attracted you to the partnership, smarter working opportunities is probably the top answer. And if we say to people, what would cause you to leave? Probably the 2 things would be lack of career opportunity development and taking away smarter working flexible opportunities. So we really need to listen to that now, because that is it's not just the future, that is now, that's what people are saying now. But there's a lot of those things, that it's trying to do all of those things as much as we can, recognizing that it's a big set of things we try to focus on.
Thank you, Sandy. Mike, I saw your hand going up. Did you want to come in specifically on Martin's question?
No, it's probably on a number of points, Luan, so
Okay.
I will wait my turn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go to Christian next.
Thank you very much, Luan. It's a very good report, and it highlights exactly what we've been saying for months, if not for years. Retention and recruitment will be the most difficult part nowadays of our organizations. I do understand that retention are becoming crucial. On the recruitment, there is a couple of things that I wanted to maybe some comment on that. First of all, on international recruitment, I really would like, learn about that before, to see a kind of timeline of how we're getting on that in international recruitment. I'm always scared that international recruitment just happens by accident more than by design. So, there is a fluidity, there is a lot of things happening across the world, a lot of we are in competition with a lot of other countries. So it'll be good to have that kind of timeline and understanding how we're getting on, if you could have some comment on that. And the second one is on page 88. For some of our services, we have our workforce, I've seen page 88, is predominantly female. So what do we do for some our services to increase the pool in recruitment by trying to attract men to some of our services?
Thanks, Christian. Sandy, your hand's up. Did you want to answer those 2 questions?
I'll have a go, yeah. And I'm conscious there's others in the call, particularly around international recruitment. If June Brown or others want to add to what I'm saying, by all means, do that. I think one of the things we're trying to do is look at every opportunity that is in our gift. And currently, for example, we have tried, and we are still exploring the opportunity of a large number of Ukrainian citizens and others coming to live in Aberdeen. And many of them are really, really, really keen to work for us, and trying to explore to the absolute maximum how feasible it is to transfer their skills and their previous qualifications in another country that we can't easily connect and get the information on, and whether and this is where the bit about working with employers becomes important. We won't employ them. It'll be either NHS Grampian and or Aberdeen City Council and or some of the independent care providers or Bonaccord Care. So we have to work closely with those providers to try and, if you like, fill in the gap of information that definitely exists, such as disclosure checks or previous references, or some of the things that would be absolutely standard in the NHS social care system in Scotland. So trying to do that would be one thing we're definitely trying to do, and have worked hard in doing that. I think the point about there is a lot of international recruitment, that's the example I was maybe saying, whether June or somebody else wanted to talk about. NHS Grampian has done a lot of work, for example, trying to recruit and attract people from Australia. That has been pretty successful, and some of those people are working in the Aberdeen Health and Social Care System. Don't necessarily mean Aberdeen Partnership, but the Aberdeen Health and Social Care System. So I think it is not easy, but we are trying to maximise currently some of those opportunities are right here in our doorstep, particularly the Ukrainian example. I'll maybe pause to let others who've done more work than me around actually going abroad and supporting that.
Thanks, Sandy. Does anyone want to come in to add some info? June?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Thank you, Luann. My name is June Brown. I'm the Executive Nurse Director in NHS Grampian, and I am a member of the IJB. So in relation to nursing midwifery recruitment internationally, I can tell you that last year, the year of 21-22, we had 23 nurses came to Grampian. We've not recruited any midwives. And this year, so up until the 21st of November, which was last week, we have recruited 34. We have 25 people in process, and we're going out to engage with another 34. So we have a target of 93 people this year. They won't all be in Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership, but they are across NHS Grampian. Thank you.
Thanks, June. And Sandy, the second part of Christian's question was about attracting men into the workforce. Is there anything you can say on that in particular?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I spend a lot of my time thinking, how do we support and maintain our 90% of staff, and what do we do to attract them? I think part of the answer to that is highlighting things such as social care are not just jobs that females should be looking at, and there's some local examples and some national examples trying to showcase some of those things as being in our kind of media profile or other kind of public ways, showing that those careers are shouldn't just be for females. It is quite challenging, because some of the roles that we have by kind of through due process have to be females chaperoning or supporting females receiving treatment. So there is quite a lot of some of those posts as well. But I think trying to break down the barriers about care in particular, and I would imagine Sandra's probably more connected from her previous roles, a huge swathe of our social care staff are female. So the public perception of thinking social care is a role for females, we have to challenge that and try to use and role models. And, as an example, a couple of weeks ago, we had our report in Scotland, we had a good promotion around the vaccination booster programme in the vaccination centre. Don't know if anybody saw that, but our senior nurse that was doing that was a guy, and I think that's it was a coincidence, he just happens to be our senior nurse, but that's a positive example. Our immunisation lead and our CTAC lead in the city is a guy, and it is convenient then when we're using that as an example of senior nursing people can be male, and to kind of draw that kind of interest.
Thanks, Sandy. Sandra? Oh.
Sorry, if I may,
Christian.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And it's exactly the word, but I wanted to avoid. It's a coincidence. And I think on international recruitment, it was the same kind of thing. It's more by accident than anything else. So it would be great if we could do things by design. It's what I was trying to point out.
Thanks, Christian. Sandra, did you want to add? You're still on mute, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you, Luann. And it's just really to add on that point, there is work that's been done at a local level with our secondary schools, particularly in education, and looking at how we can attract people coming directly out of school into foundation and apprenticeships courses. And I think that is an area that we can certainly pick up and then start to focus on, maybe removing some of the stereotypes that care, health and social care is just for women. I think Fiona Mitchell-Hill might well be on the call. She's around some of that along with Eleanor Shepherd, and I think June Brown has recently been as well across in some overseas areas that are highlighting areas whereby we can really link in secondary school education directly into career pathways and care. So I think that's a really valid point that you make, Councillor. So I think that we should really take that on board with some of the early work that's involved with alongside education and health and social care, and bring that in. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Christian, you content with that? And I see in the chat as well, just to add, that Lynn Morrison has commented that we're also in discussion about NHS international recruitment around AHP recruitment, so wider than nursing and midwifery as well. So a lot of activity going on.
Thanks very much for that. Great. And if you could have highlighted in future reports, it'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. So next we have Alison Murray.
Hi, yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm not putting the camera on because for some reason I couldn't get on my iPad, so it's balanced on my iPad. I'm on my iPad, it's balanced on the side of the chair. Looking at page 90, going back to turnover, this might be just an anomaly, but under 20s, you went from 0 turnover to, well, up to 36%, more than a third of them turning over the year. I wonder if the numbers are really small, and the 36% represents 1 of 3 people, or it just seems odd that we went from 0 across the board to relatively high numbers. And the other comment I had was actually on page 93, when we're talking about over 65s and 2/3 of them will be living with multi-morbidity by 2035. I was wondering if it's worth considering that with the pension age going up, some of those individuals will still be part of the working population age. And I was wondering if that's something we need to start considering if the cutoff at 65 starts to make sense, whether perhaps we need to look at the very older level of the workforce. So the youngest end of the workforce and the oldest end of the workforce is my question.
Thank you, Alison. Sandy?
Yeah, I'll maybe take opportunity. I'll answer the second question or a reflection on it, and maybe ask whether Stuart or Michelle, a sort of stats answer to the first one, but I know my place and I kind of make stats predictions. So I think the point's a good one about older staff, and I think I remember it wasn't that long ago, when it was in my career, that people had to get an annual letter to say the manager said, yeah, Sandy is over 65 and he can continue to work and he is happy to continue to work. An organisation almost had to kind of do that on an annual basis. I would describe now, and one of my best colleagues, one of my kind of most helpful direct reports, I think I want to name her, but she's well into her 70s and kind of thankfully showing no sign of stopping yet. So I think we are in a different place from the kind of not that long ago when we had to kind of get permission to stay beyond 65. I think it is entirely reasonable. It's a good point that was made about there's no upper ceiling on our age, because one of the things it is in the plan talking about over 50% are likely to retire by the age of 65. I think my experience recently, and it's maybe just the company I'm keeping, many of the people I know are retiring are nowhere near 65, So we certainly can't be excluding, and we want to encourage and recognise and support people who want to carry on working well into their 70s probably. But the stats question, I'll leave Michelle or Stuart to come back on.
Yeah, thank you. I'll maybe jump in before Michelle, and I'll probably get told off by Michelle if I get this wrong. But if you look at page 89, just above Alison, you'll see that over the past 4 years, there's been a steady increase of the age profile of our workforce between the age brackets of 20 and 34. That's increased steadily over the past 4 years. So that's then naturally going to result in some of those staff obviously leaving over time. I know that's a relatively short answer to why it's went from 0 and then there's been a sudden increase, and you'll see the differences between the different employers, ACC and NHSG, so that might help explain it. But I'll pass over to Michelle for a more in-depth answer there.
To be honest, Stuart, I think you've probably covered what I was going to say. Sorry, I'll introduce myself. My name's Michelle Grant. I'm one of the transformation programme managers, specifically around digital and data. So as Stuart's kind of alluded to there, the sort of page previously gives the breakdown of staff numbers by age category. And Alison, yeah, the under 20s is by far the smallest population of our staffing. And it could be the case that through COVID, we've had a number of temporary contracts, and those have come to an end over the past year. I suppose it's quite difficult for her to ascertain that exact reason for leaving for that numbers, but that's what I would take from the data, is that it is just small numbers for that under 20s age category.
Yeah, thank you. It doesn't actually say in the previous page how many under 20s you have, so I wonder if it's worth noting somewhere how that's a very, very small population, because it does give a sort of suggestion that NHS Grampian is a terrible employer for under 20s, which perhaps, as you say, doesn't actually reflect what is actually the case.
Thank you, Alison. Thanks for raising those points. We'll go to June now. Christian, your hand's still up, but I think that's maybe from previous, and you're not coming back in. Okay, we'll move to June. June, and you come.
Thank you, Luann, and thank you for this workforce report. I really like the graphics in it. I think it's really accessible and people can get into it quite quickly. I also like the plan, attract, employ, train, nurture element of it, coming obviously nationally, but I think it sees that whole range of activity that goes around workforce planning, so I think that's really good. I've got a few questions. So my first question is in relation to the culture survey that's carried out by NHS Grampian, and it was for nurses and midwives, but it had a lot about what the workforce needs to look like and the culture around that. And I just wondered if that had been part of the data that was used to create the work plan for this workforce report. My second question is in relation to really around about the current financial situation. So as an organisation, you know, and the local, looking at what.
June, you're breaking up a little bit. I don't know if you're able to go closer to your mic or if you've got a signal issue.
It's my PC. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. So we heard your question about culture, but your second one about the culture survey, the second one was just a little broken up.
Okay, I was just indicating the current financial position. So there'll be an expectation for the NHS and the local authority to be doing things differently with the purse that they have. And does this workforce plan have that adaptability and flexibility built into it to be able to retain and recruit staff? Is my other question. And my last question, it's really quite similar to Anne's previously. It's about, you know, is there anything in here around about how we change the conditions for working to support that older generation that are going to be here till they're 67 or 70, or equally that Gen Z population that we're challenged to recruit, and how do we make it attractive for them? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, June. Sandy, so there's 3 questions there. Do you want to come in on all 3 or pick one?
I'll have a go and then see where we get. I think the conditions is an interesting one. To start with that one, I recently attended a session with Grampian colleagues, NHS Grampian colleagues, kind of with the premise of we can't change national terms and conditions. So in case anybody in the call is worried, I was a way to say that, but we can't. But what else can we do to try and make the organisation more attractive to come to join and or stay? So an example might be, we explored at that meeting, people are paying a lot of money in parking charges. That is, you know, that's coming out after they've had their tax. That's coming a big part of their pay on some people in the city centre. What could we explore? Things such as some of the companies in the kind of northeast. Luann will be familiar with this kind of model, of some of the big fish companies give people free lifts, pick them up and drop them off across the city, across the towns of Shire to get them to their work and have no parking charges. So we're exploring some of the conditions that potentially might make it more attractive to organisations. None of this has been agreed, so this is just preliminary discussions. And the kind of discussions might be, would we want to say to people, and this again hasn't been agreed, but just to illustrate, potentially, on people's birthday, would we consider as an organisation offering them an additional day's annual leave? And it's not, we haven't agreed that, but it's part of that thing about saying, are you valued? Do you feel valued? Does that something that would make you wish to stay? Is the cost of that less than the benefit it would provide? You know, we're just exploring those kind of things. So those are one of the things that around the conditions. I think probably around technology and to kind of point about reducing budgets. I think Sandra certainly regularly reminds us to think about how we can do things differently digitally, not just kind of smarter working, but can we use technology to reduce and replace some of the things that previously in the past were done, if you like, laboriously, that we've now all become accustomed to some of those things. So a continual challenge in reviewing those things. And I think it's a good point June's making. We should expect the days of huge annual increases in the public sector NHS budgets are gone. So I think we need to keep reviewing and thinking about all those things. And I'm now going to forget what the first one was, but I think that was two of the questions.
Yeah, the first one, Sandy, was about the culture survey that was done by NHS
apologies,
Grampian and covered nurses, midwifery and the estates and facilities staff. Has that been factored in to this plan?
I think the answer to that is yes. However, those only covered a significant but part of our organisation. So although nurses are the biggest number of any one discipline, there's 2,000 kind of staff and nurses are only a kind of proportion of that. So it doesn't include all of the staff but we did, for example, I attended some meetings with some sexual health team as a result of their Culture Matters survey and looking to say, what can we do to improve the organisation? And that is being fed into the workforce plan.
Thank you, Sandy. June, content we move on? Yeah, great. Oh, I see Michelle's put her hand up. Michelle, did you want to add anything to what Sandy
It was
had
really
said?
just to clarify that the majority of the data was compiled from the HR systems that are within ACC and NHSG.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you. Okay, we've got two more hands up and then we'll draw this to a close. So we've got Mike next and then Sandra McDonald.
Thanks, Luann. As you would expect, I've got a little bit to say on this. So I will start off in a positive manner in saying that the IJB should recognise the fact that they are very, very lucky that they have got somebody that champions well-being of staff to the highest degree, and I really need to acknowledge that. So, and Sandy is sitting there getting embarrassed now because him and me usually clash. I don't usually say it, but I will give him credit for its due. We could use some of that within NHSG. So that's the positive bit. The rest of it is to get quite so positive. The staff that we have got, the biggest gaps are highly trained staff. They are nurses, they are AHPs, etc. We already employ almost everybody that we can in the area. Trying to attract people to this area is virtually impossible just because of the high cost of living. We have tried various things. For this results in is that we have got gaps and shortages of staff. The staff are running like a fair, and yeah, we have actually hit folk that have started and quit real quick because it's just too much. We then go and then we look and we say we need to do things different. Number one, we have got ways that we will hate to do that. We have never been against Stony Out. But the fact of it is that nobody is brave enough to turn around and say, yeah, well, actually, this is what we stop doing because we can't do anything else. This is the first staffing and health crisis that we have seen, certainly in my time in the NHS, that you can't see an end. Every time before we have known if we got past June, if we got past this, then and that was the month of June, not June. They said there, sorry, June. But this time, that is not the case. We are speaking about changing the culture, but at this moment in time, when we are trying to get folk to here buy-in, how do you do that? For they're actually trying to survive day to day. The staffing levels they've got, the work that is put down. I earlier it was mentioned about training, etc. Yeah, we are finding it difficult to release folk for their mandatory and statutory training. Never mind anything else. We have areas that still have difficulties getting breaks, never mind anything else. So although a lot of the stuff comes from a good place and we well intentions, it's actually totally unrealistic. And the one thing you need more now than ever is to be realistic. We have two organisations which are the employers that are in an extremely precarious position budget-wise. And if anybody thinks that their precarious position want to offshoot onto everybody else, then they would be very much mistaken. The challenges and concerns that are coming up are massive. as I say, we are ready with the international stuff that NHSG does. I think we've got a great team that does that, but it is minuscule compared to what we need and what we are now getting. And I can only speak to you as staff side and folk coming to us, for we are getting now. It's been highlighted. Retention is extremely difficult. We've got stacks of folk that are either retiring or are contemplating retiring. We're losing a lot of experience. Lynn did pick out the retire and return, but that's in its infancy and just starting. But we are, if you ask those people, and actually some of them are at a quite senior level, so they want to give an exit interview. Can't blame them for that, but they will say to us, yeah, it's because they are burnt out. The gaps are too big. We can't see an end. We have got a strategy, a smarter working, hybrid working, which is actually a bonus. How do we fund that in the future? Was that funded through COVID money? We haven't got the money to replace that tech on budgets that are heading down the way. Older staff, yeah, you're going to hate them, but that brings its own challenges within that. When we see how long some of them are going to hate it, facilities, as I had a reputation in older staff, and as for the conditions and that, I love the ideas that go about Sandy, but when I even managed to get the shuttle buses back yet, never mind get folk a lift to run around the town. So it's good to speak about it, but need to be realistic. As you can expect, we had our finance report yesterday, so that does influence how you think about things, even though Alex, while we still for you, it does a really good job. Yeah, this bit of it, you kind of see real solutions. It's going to take forever, and it's going to be really challenging. Right, I'm sorry to be on the negative side of it, but that's the realistic stuff. I'm not going to complain about leadership or anything like that. I have seen Sandra almost beat her head against a brick wall trying to get bits in to try and for the well-being, and they are slip in the end. And that most of that is just the pressure that's being put and public and Scottish government expectation that's put on the organisations. That is my sermon for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I don't hear that as a tall negative. I hear that as a real truth of reality just now, and really important that we're not creating a strategy that's about, you know, the yellow brick road that doesn't exist, but actually it has to be grounded in where we're at now. So really welcome your comments, Mike. Did someone want to come back on that? I see Fiona's hands up. Fiona, did you want to respond? No, it was on a different point. Sandra, do you want to come in? Sandra MacLeod, in response to Mike overall.
Yeah, I think Mike raises some very valid points, and it's not something that's far from all of our opportunities, you know, on all of our thinking. It's absolutely right and valid points that we do need to. Recruitment is an issue, but recruitment's not a new issue. Retention, I would suggest, is the bigger issue that we're facing now, which does cause a different aim and a different ambition for us. We do need to work in our financial envelopes. You're absolutely right. There isn't huge amounts of money coming down there, so we need to reshape and reform. I think as a health and social care partnership, we've got some good track records, and the IJB have got a good track record of approving some of that if we consider investments in health visiting and district nursing. So we will have to be really mindful about new models of care. But as I say, I think Mike raises some very valid points and good comments that we're hearing, and just to be reassured to the IJB that we are very mindful of that, and it's very much of our priority about looking after staff, maintaining our staff, and looking at new models reflecting our demographics locally, as well as so that we can change that how we deliver. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. There's something for me as well, and it was going back to what Christian had said and a few of the other comments, is I think what would be helpful is for us to be able to see what's our strategic intention? Which parts of the workforce are we expecting to increase and by when? And so that we're making sure that we're targeting all the activities in the right areas, because the report rightly is quite high level, but I think it's the detail that maybe sits under it that would give us some assurance that all the work that we're doing around staff retention, we expect that to yield, you know, an X percentage of people staying longer than we would have previously expected. You know, so it's just some idea of the modelling of where all this work's going to get us, I think would be helpful. Sandra.
Can I come back on that, Luann? So I absolutely agree. To be able to give a degree of certainty over recruitment and retention in the current situation would feel assuring. What I would suggest is that it is going back to some of the work that we're already doing, and we'll be unclear about some of that transformation. So as I alluded to earlier, if you consider how we work with our secondary school colleagues about our further colleges and further education, at this moment in time, those are early, they're new ideas, they're innovative and they're transformational. We are looking to expand that, but to say to you that we expect this to yield 50 new people coming into that, I think that we would struggle to get that, although I do understand. I think the other key part for us is about looking at our models. We can't continue to reshape our models and continue to say we need 5 of X here. It's not widget, you know, and you fully understand this, and you understand this as a board. So I think what we're trying to do is within each of our areas is empower our staff locally, empower our leaders locally to work within the financial resources that they have to look at things creatively. So in different areas, we're more empowering to say, what could that look like? And that is why our plan is quite high level. If we go into specifics, and we've run risk of this before, for example, if we consider the primary care improvement plan, that was very much explicitly how many people you employ by when, and that becomes the driver rather than the new models, the new changes, the retention. So just very mindful that we will absolutely keep the board up to date, but would be more about how we're moving in that general direction as opposed to giving explicit figures if that's agreeable with the IGB.
Yeah, and I understand that, and we don't want to be chasing targets. We want to be encouraging teams on the ground to do the right thing and to do the best, to get the best outcomes. I suppose it's how we evolve that over time to give us the right assurance, and I think we just need to keep on having these conversations so that we're supporting and encouraging activity in the right areas. So yeah, ongoing discussions for us to have, I think. Right, conscious of our time as well, there are a few more hands up, so we'll keep going through. We've got Sandra MacDonald next, and then after Sandra, we've got Fiona.
Thanks very much, Luann. My first question was around, or my first comment, I suppose, was that I did find, like June, the report very accessible in the plan, the graphics and so on. And my question around that is it going to be pushed out to staff in any sort of way so that they can you know, see it in the same way? I note that the monitoring of it will from a board perspective is going to the RAPC committee, but it was really just to see how widely it did get out to staff. My second question is more around data, I guess, and is there any correlation between supporting staff and their well-being and retention? Does that come through at all in a correlation? And it might not be easy because, you know, the stats show that there are X number of full-time equivalents and all the rest of it, so there are a lot more people than there are posts, so to speak. And my third area was around, I suppose, what Sandy was saying about the various ways of supporting staff and so on, and just how childcare figures, because with a big population of women in the workforce, how does that impact on not just recruitment, but particularly around retention as well, and if that could be answered as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandra. I think Stuart's hands came up quickly, so we'll bring you in, Stuart.
Yeah, I can certainly answer the first question. I'll maybe hand over to Michelle or Sandy for the other two. So we're required to publish our workforce plan on our website once it's approved by IJB, and we've informed Scottish Government that should be hopefully, fingers crossed, following today's meeting. We'll then use the same routes we did for the wider staff consultation and feedback with this workforce plan once it's published, to make sure that all staff have access and easy access to it, not just through obviously the link on the website, but they'll be sent the document too. So we'll make sure we're getting around all the staffing groups that are within the partnership, just like we did for the consultation, and we'll follow those same routes which have been successful for us before. So hopefully that answers that first question.
Thank you, Stuart. Sandy, Michelle, do you want to come in on the other points about staff retention and well-being, and also the childcare question?
I might let Michelle kind of give a statistical input.
I suppose the short answer I can give is that there's no proven correlation at the moment that we have access to around about the supporting staff and retention. And I suppose that's largely because feeling supported is quite individualistic. So whereas our retention figures are something that's we can divulge yearly, and we could probably get monthly updates, how staff feel supported could change on a weekly basis, quarterly, depending on other staffing levels, outside pressures, etc. So that correlation is not something that we currently have access to, but potentially, a further questionnaire survey, we could gain some insight into that and try and gather a correlation from it. Hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Sandy, did you want to come in any further on the childcare question?
Yeah, I was recently down at the City Hospital speaking to some staff, and one of the sort of senior operational colleagues told me the story, that was a true story, about somebody who was going to go off on maternity leave and wanted to come back in a very flexible way. And previously that had not been possible and that hadn't been agreed. And that person left and is now somewhere else. And the person that was speaking to me is pregnant with her second child and came back in flexible working policies and will be coming back on the same basis. And I think, just as an illustration, that's what we're trying to develop, that culture that retains those people and allows people to be childcare friendly as well as family friendly. And the point about being unpaid carer family friendly, there'll be huge chunks of our staff are unpaid carers, and we need to take cognizance of that as well. So those are the kind of things that matter to people, and we need to really get into that mindset of what matters to people, and those are the kind of things that do.
I agree.
Thank you, Sandy. So move on now to Fiona Mitchell-Hill.
Thanks, Luann. And I'm Fiona, I'm the lead nurse for the partnership, so it's nice to be here today. Thank you. And I would agree with Sandy, when I have my services are nursing, and the majority of them are female and working, a lot of them part-time because of childcare. So I think we are very flexible to that, Sandra, because I know the challenges of having to fill the gaps because the proportion of my staff are part-time workers because of that very reason. And I guess I just wanted to share, to build on a little bit about the education collaboration. So I think we're much smarter than we have been in previous years around about how we can work together with different providers or different agencies like education. So there's much closer collaboration and sharing of intelligence than we had before. So I think that's absolutely something we're building on as a workforce. From a nursing point of view, is how can we work with other professionals that can help us to gather intelligence to ensure that we're doing the best thing, rather than everything sitting with the health visitors or the school nurses, but actually how can we in partnership work with colleagues. So that was one, I think we've done a lot of work in that in the last couple of years. I think our skill mixing is definitely there. We're now looking at having band 3 and band 4 nurses. Well, we have already. These are unregistered professionals, but are doing SVQs and such like to get qualifications. We've certainly led the way in that, and trying and getting those people in our teams. So we've got a number of those now working in our services, which just helps to get the registrants working on what only they can deliver, and let those with other skills being around to support people. We've had some really good conversations with NESCOL recently about how we can promote some of our services within that college idea. They've got a high proportion of young population going through their doors, so they're really keen to work with us on that. So that's really positive as well, to try and get those under 20s that we were speaking about earlier. And I think to go back to the exit interviews, so yes, Kim, they absolutely happen, but as a manager don't see them because it's an HR process and they go to HR. So unless there is an issue or themes that come up, we don't get the feedback from the exit interviews. But Jason did put in the chat that we're starting to stay conversations, and we're testing that with some of our nursing teams. And this is something that Jason saw on Twitter and kindly got in touch and connected and shared with me. I shared with my team leaders who were really keen. And this is just to try and flip that conversation around, is what is it that makes you stay here? What do we need to build on? So really, really positive conversations happening to try and do that retention of our staff. And I guess one other thing I would say is that we've invested heavily in technology that was spoken about earlier as well. So we have now got all of our nursing services nearly. The majority, certainly all the large ones, are now all using electronic records. Again, we've led the way in Grampian for this. And I think that is seen as a partnership what we're investing in, and it is to make things easier for our staff. So hopefully that will help to make us look as an employer under NHS Grampian, but of choice, but for the areas to try and attract people to come and work with us, that we're willing to listen and hear and adapt and change services to meet the needs of our staff as well as our patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. It's really helpful to get that overview from you. I'll go now to John Tomlinson and then John Cook.
Okay, thanks, Luann. I wasn't going to come in so that people who were going to be around this would have their say today, but I just wanted to pick up on the back of what Mike had put in and then the conversation around that. So I think it's a really good report and it's a really good step forward, and there's a lot of necessary work going on, which is responding to the various challenges, and those have been aired. But it's that point, and you made it, Luann, about the modelling. And I, just from a point of assurance of the board, I would encourage the team not to be too reluctant about bringing forward scenarios about, because there's a load of good information here about what the demand is going to be in future, but that bit about the capacity to meet the demand and what the gap is. So a way of doing that, because I do understand why you'd be reluctant to pin, say, here's some numbers and then in a sense be accountable for that. But a way to do it would be to have different scenarios with the assumptions behind the scenarios and the potential numbers, depending if the assumptions come to fruition or not. And what will happen is the assumptions then become the focus as opposed to the numbers. But it is a way of then getting into, and as a board, enabling Mike's comments to be sitting alongside the really good work that's going on as well. So that's just really a suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you, John. I see Sandy nodding, and definitely work for us to be done, and I'm thoughtful of colleagues that we can maybe pull in to help with this as well, that are experienced in that model in different scenarios. Fraser as well may have ideas about how we might use our independent auditor differently in the future, so this could come under that as well. But yeah, definitely more work to be done, but not taken away from the positive elements that are already there. John Cook.
Thanks, Luann. Yeah, and it's kind of in similar vein to John Tomlinson's comments. I thought the report was really good. I thought Mike Adams' input was really important. What Mike was saying was worrying, but actually I wasn't that terribly surprised. And I thought the way he raised the issues was very constructive and helpful. In terms of some of the things that Sandy's been saying, clearly we are doing some outside the box thinking and trying to be innovative to try and fix the bits that are within our within our gift to fix. Some of them aren't. So question from me to officers would be, excuse me, how else can we help? Because I feel I'm getting reassurance that you're working your socks off and moving in the right direction. But how else can we as board members help?
Thanks, John. Sandy?
Thank you. I guess a couple of things just jump into my mind. One would be all of us talking up the organisation and telling everybody, we're kids, we're neighbours, the dustmen, whoever, that this is a good organisation to join, as opposed to just talking about all the problems and all the things, and everybody's tired and everybody's exhausted, which is true, but trying to talk up the organisation, I think we've all got the opportunities there. We've all got lots and lots of networks of people talking up career pathways. I think the other thing that jumped in my head was that the theme of well-being being a high priority and profile across the whole of the IJB, and for people to expect that to have a high profile. I don't necessarily mean spending millions of pounds on it, but for that to be recognised, seen as credibly one of the substantive things we can do to make things better and to improve and retain or improve staff well-being and to retain people. It wasn't that long ago, kind of people would have said well-being is actually pre anybody here, well-being is staff's own responsibility, and kind of why would an organisation spend X, Y, and Z money on that? So collectively talking up well-being, and it's significant. It does sound slightly soft and fuzzy compared to some of the harder edge stuff, but talking that up and asking about that and expecting that to be a high profile, that would be the two things briefly, Luann, would kind of jump into my mind in response to that question.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sandy.
Andy.
And I think you've got an open offer from John Cook and myself and probably other IJB members that if something else comes to your mind after today, then it's an open door to come back to us, and we can be ambassadors for the messages that the team want to get out there. Jason.
Yeah, thanks very much, Luann, and indeed Sandy. So I guess I was just wanted to share something I was just reflecting on as you were making those comments there, Sandy, about the kind of positive message. I think there's something in there about, as ever, a kind of nuanced balance of making sure that we are sharing, I guess, a realism, as you were saying, and others were nodding. We're all, it's difficult, but actually so that we're not painting an overly rosy picture of things. But I guess it's the mixture of it is a challenge, but actually, I think what staff in particular will want to hear is an acknowledgement of the pressures that we face, but also that positive, next steps. And I think inevitably I'm bound to talk a bit about the culture, and so that's about the conversations we have out with, but also the conversations that we all have in our day-to-day organisational life as leaders in the organisation and IJB members, etc. So again, I'm really attracted to that concept of the stay interview, and in many regards you could argue that an exit interview is too late in the timeline of people's decision making. So how do we, and that requires us to make, because if you're doing an exit interview for the 10% that left to take one figure, there's another 90% that have stayed, and that takes time and effort to invest that time. But again, and we'll never be able to do that for all staff, but I guess it's what value do we place in all levels of leadership about those proactive conversations about what is possible for us to do, because yes, it would be great to fill all vacancies, and those will all be longer term issues, but the recognizing the value in the people that are here and understanding what we can do is so important. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason, and I'm pleased you've brought in the culture element and the importance of relationships, because that's really core to how we are as an IJB and how we are as a partnership. So really helpful to have that noted. So I'm conscious of our time now, and what I'd ask is that I would like that in the minute we specifically record the points that Mike raised about the reality of the endurance system that everyone's working within at the moment, and that the pressures that we have around recruitment, and that some of the posts that we're looking to recruit, that they don't exist, and that's not going to be, there's no magic wand to addressing our recruitment challenges, and just make sure that our discussion is caveated with that reality that we all acknowledge, and that what we're hearing today is that there's a whole range of activities and actions that are focused on our staff well-being, how we retain staff, how we empower frontline staff to come up with solutions that are going to work for them. We do that through our cultural intent, which is around conversations and building relationships and understanding people's individual needs. We're also really up for the technology element being used, and that we recognise people and our different people in our workforce are all different, and so therefore we'll need different things. So I'd ask that the minute records that, and that we also capture the point about, and ask, I think, to look at, could we have modelling of different scenarios so that we have some data that we're working to that doesn't absolutely nail down why is there not X amount of staff doing this, but actually just gives us a sense of the direction of travel that we want to go in, that recognising that things will evolve, and we can't predict exactly what's going to happen, but if there could be some work done around the modelling of different scenarios, I think that would be helpful and would help build that assurance piece for the board. but not taken away from the positive contributions and comments that we've heard today in the plan. So with those caveats, if we can capture that in the minute and that area to be developed, are we content to approve the recommendations, which is to approve the final version of the workforce plan and instruct the Chief Officer to report progress annually through the Risk Audit and Performance Committee? We're content with that today, and we'll capture those other comments in the minute. Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. And I know that's been a long conversation, but like saying at the start, workforce, you know, there's nothing more important than our workforce, and it's how we're going to deliver our strategic intent. So really important we took that time today. So thank you all for your contributions. And amazingly, it's midday. So I think we take our break now at 12 for 30 minutes, and we come back at 12:30 to finish the final papers that are on our agenda today. So thanks all, and see you at 12:30. Emma, are you wanting to keep people in this? Do we just switch our cameras off? Is that the easiest thing to do for folk?
Yes,
and we'll come
please,
back
Chair.
using the same link.
I'll keep the recording going, so just if people can be aware of chatting for the next half hour, if you could put cameras and microphones off, please.
Okay. Thank you, Emma.
Sandy's still here in his lunch because he fitted another meeting in between this meeting. Did you, Sandy? Now that I'm grassing you off, but he's obviously now listening.
I had a lovely break and had a nice bit of lunch, and I've just done some star jumps because I was cold. So I'm ready to go.
I don't think anybody can top that one, Luann.
Now here's John back. I'm sure he's been out taking a jog or doing something that way. He's got to be competing with his co-chair.
You're still on mute, John.
Sorry, no, just been having a sandwich and checking the news headlines, and that's about it.
I think a cup of tea sometimes does the trick as well.
Yes. So I'm making that 12:30. Emma, can you just confirm we're quorate and we're good to go? We've got who we need here.
Yes, if we could just confirm, Kim Crittenden, are you back in the meeting? We are quorate, but I was just checking we are. If Kim and June appears to be on a call, but we are quorate, Chair.
Okay, so we'll get started. It's remiss of me not to say at the end of that last full discussion, thanks to Stuart and Sandy and Michelle and the whole team that are behind the workforce plan. Don't underestimate the huge amount of work that's going on to produce that, but also what you're doing day in, day out for us all. So thank you very much. And I meant to say that before, but I was in such a rush to finish at 12. But anyway, it's really, really appreciated. Great team that we have doing that work. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you're all refreshed and have done your equivalent of star jumps, whatever reboots you for this afternoon session. We've got four different topics to consider this afternoon. We're going to start with the supplementary work plan, and I think we'll have Neil introducing that. I would just remind everyone at the start that this session's still in public, so if there is any questions on the exempt papers, if you could signal that at the start, and we'll hold them till we're in, if we need to go into private session, but we'll keep our questions at the moment on the public pack, if that's okay for folk. So Neil, I'll hand over to you, and if you could introduce yourself, Neil, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, Neil Stevenson. I'm the strategic procurement manager, and I manage the contracts team, and we do the contracts for the IGB for the partnership and well for the board. So today we are here with 5 business cases, and for your consideration and hopefully for your approval. Each business case fits into the partnership's strategic direction. I'll briefly go through each one, and of course I'm happy to answer any questions. And also there are various people here today who, Shona and Jenny, I can see, who are also here and be able to answer questions if required. So business case C is a housing support service, and there's 2 recommendations there, and that is to award 2 contracts to cover the housing support, which the contract is coming to an end, and we've done a considerable work to get a provider to do this for us going forward as the incumbent provider moves on. These contracts were originally transferred to the partnership in April 22 after sitting under ACC's housing team for the previous years, and these contracts, they always said, are they housing, are they social care? And I think the decision was, because of the clients involved, that was probably more on the social care side. So there's approvals there for those. Business cases D and E, they are for residential care homes for adults, both with mental health difficulties and also those with learning disabilities. Now, the key to these two is that the providers who offer these services are actually owning the buildings, owning the premises, and the clients who are there, it's their homes. So we really don't have much choice other than to direct toward those contracts, in the knowledge that we will, of course, carry out rigorous monitoring to make sure they still are fit for purpose, obviously. But when it's somebody's home, it's difficult to do anything else than to continue the services if they're still fine. There are 98 places approximately within the residential care home for the mental health services, so it's a lot of people in a number of services. But I think there's going to be quite a lot of work done by Jenny and her team around the strategic commissioning, the accommodation review, to progress the work there, and this will give time, this direct award, to make sure that work is done properly and thoroughly. Business case F is the Rubislaw Park nursing home, which came across the board's desk this time last year, and that was to get end of life beds, and was at that point was well, it wasn't rushed through, but it was really urgent, and we managed to get that through the board, and we're now looking to extend that service because it was a considerable success. And there has been time. James Maitland has been doing a review, and all that consultation work has been done. So we're hopeful that the plan going forward will meet the needs for the end of life beds. There is an additional approval requested there, in the sense that if the current provider does pull out or can no longer deliver the service, that the board would approve us to go and find somebody else, again, really to give us that safety and security around making sure we had those beds available. And finally, business case G is for a new nursing home which has opened up in Aberdeen, and we're looking to get use of up to 43 beds. I think last I heard it might be somewhere more in the 30s, but anyway, approval for up to 43 beds, to use those beds to take discharges from hospital, emergency discharges, unplanned discharges, and to be able to have those spaces for them. It's an outstanding resource, and I think the one that the board would be advised, I think, to take up that opportunity. So that's really a very brief. Try to tiptoe my way through that, Luann. I failed on one occasion, but did my best. And just again to point out that rigorous monitoring takes place on all these contracts and will continue to be done so, both by my team, by Alison McLeod's transitional team, and also the services, Jenny and her team, to make sure that for the individual placements that they are well looked after. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. And colleagues will remember I said at the start of the meeting we have papers which are about keeping the show on the road, and this is very much about that, keeping the services we have stable and sustainable to get us through winter and beyond. So really important services that we are considering here. So I'll open that up now for any queries or comments anyone has. John Tomlinson.
Yes, thank you. Can I ask Neil, I understand the continuity, that's really important for individuals who are living there. Where there are vacancies in the period of the contract, is flexibility built into those contracts for different needs, different complexity for new people who might need the accommodation?
Yes, absolutely, John. There would, whenever a vacancy comes up, there will be a particular panel, and I'm going to say a panel, and I'm hoping Jenny is going to jump in and give you the more technical response. But yes, there's always the opportunity to make sure that those beds don't go to waste because they are needed. But I'll probably hand over to Jenny there if that's possible, Jenny.
Yeah, happy to come in. So I'm Jenny Ray, Programme Manager for Mental Health and Learning Disability Services. So in terms of the services that we're looking at, they have previously been block funded by the partnership, and now we're moving to a spot purchase arrangement, which gives us a lot of flexibility around the placements that are made there. And it also allows us to look at our current need and our future trending need and what we require to develop in terms of service provision, so that's responsive to people's needs. And then that ties in with our market position statement, which we completed last year, which was really focused on providing good quality accommodation-based services for people, so both in residential and supported living services for people with mental health and learning disabilities. And that ensures that these services are going to be responsive, that they're going to meet the kind of organisational needs that we have, but also people's own individual needs and their individual outcomes as well. And yes, there's a panel that considers and that is the right term, the panel that considers the needs of individuals and how those may be best met, whether it's in those resources or other resources we have access to.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. John Cook.
Thanks, Lana. If just follow up on Jenny's answer there, if we're moving to spot purchase and away from block purchase, presumably that is more financially advantageous to us. But does it increase the risk of a provider not being sustainable?
I think if I can come in there, Jenny, is that okay? I think yes, John. It would certainly be more financially viable for the IJB. However, I don't see a likelihood that any of the places would not really be taken up fairly quickly if vacancies do come up. I think Jenny might want to contribute there, but that certainly has never been a problem in the past. And yeah.
Yeah, just to come in on that and really just to kind of back up what Neil has said, you know, we do have quite a high level of requirement for these types of services. They do have to think about how they meet future need. So people are living longer with more complex conditions, with a variety of medical and health needs as well. And maybe the way in which services have traditionally operated might just need to shift that a little bit, and then also needs to reflect the fact that people have an abundance of rights, and so they should have to live in their own homes, their own communities, to be really part of that. So that may see a slight shift in terms of how these services might be delivered in the future. But I think that a lot of the providers that we work with in Aberdeen City are very up for that challenge, and understand that it's a kind of evolving area of work, and really wanting to try and ensure that people's needs and the outcomes that they're trying to achieve are placed at the forefront. But as Neil has kind of referenced, we do have a requirement for these services, and we will look to undertake, I guess you might call it modernisation, for want of a better phrase, of maybe the standards of buildings that people are living in, to ensure that they have access to good quality, safe accommodation that is, you know, going to be affordable. It's going to protect them in terms of, you know, cost of living changes and things like that. And we'll do a variety of work with the providers over the life of the contracts if awarded. And we've already done significant work with them in the production of the market position statement as well.
Oh, thanks for that reassurance.
Thanks, John. Sandra.
To be honest, I think Jenny maybe kind of touched on what I was going to ask, which was really around perhaps our previous conversation about the buildings and you know, our net zero aspirations and so on of some of the buildings, and so bringing that into play, along with what Jenny mentioned around, you know, living in a modern setting and being responsive to the needs of the individuals in each of the homes in which they live. So it was really again to get that reassurance, and I take on board that, you know, one of the contracts is for a brand new facility and so on, but it's how you get that crossover if you're bringing people in and then that becomes their home and so on. And you know, where do we go with some of this? Because you know, I would imagine that some of the buildings are you know, they're absolutely fine, I'm sure, but they could be better.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. So I guess we have a variety of accommodations that are on offer for people just now, ranging from that little bit more modern, more newly built accommodation, right the way through to much more traditional accommodation. As everyone will know, you know, Aberdeen is built on granite, so it does make it challenging in terms of how people's needs change over time, particularly in reference to their mobility needs. That's probably one of the key areas that we've seen. And I think that people's association with that being their home is sometimes to do with the bricks and mortar of the building, but sometimes it's more to do with the service and the way in which they feel made to feel homely, if you like. Sorry, that maybe hasn't come out quite right, but it's maybe not so much around that actual room that they live in or the address that they stay at, but it's the feeling that's provided to them by the service that's delivered, and that might be associated with the people that they live with, the other residents, but it might also be predominantly associated with the level of care, compassion and support that's provided by our care providers, some of which are, you know, very well established providers in the city. So when we're looking at potentially maybe upgrades of accommodation or thinking about changes of accommodation, we have had some offers of more new build accommodation recently. And there's having those really key conversations with the people who are living in those settings and their loved ones around what is it they want to see happen in their lives, and you know, where are their community connections, what things do we need to be advancing for people, and really just showcasing, you know, what can we offer, what can we deliver for people, but people having that choice at the end of the day as well. And as I say, because sometimes it's not linked to that actual bricks and mortar and that address, being able then to provide some modernisations through new build accommodation in different community areas of the city is what people might opt for. The same as people might opt for having their own front doors and living more in what we might class as more mainstream accommodation as well. So engagement and communication with people is going to be at the heart of all of those conversations about any changes that would take place, and that includes with the providers as well, some of which Neil has referenced do own their own accommodation and might make some decisions themselves about what they might choose to do, and other decisions we might work in a more partnership orientated way to suggest some changes that could be made that we would see might meet that current need and the future need that's emerging.
Thank you, Jenny. And really, I think assuring for us to hear that the central core is that engagement and communication with providers, with people that use our services and with their families. So yeah, it's really, really important to hear that that's central. I'm not seeing any more hands up for questions. So if we're content, we can move to the recommendations, which are on page 112 of the pack. So there's A to F. So we're approving the direct award of a contract to 2 providers. I'm not going to read every single bit out. Hopefully people have got this in front of them. Recommendation B is to approve the direct award of 8 contracts for mental health care, as detailed in the appendices A1 and D. Recommendation C, we're approving the direct award of 2 contracts for learning disability care home providers for 5 years. D, we're approving the direct award of a contract for end-of-life beds for 5 years. E, we're approving the direct award of a contract for emergency discharge placements beds for 5 years. And F, we're making the direction as attached at Appendix B and instructing the Chief Officer to issue the direction to Aberdeen City Council. We're all content with those as listed. Yeah, great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Jenny, for all the work that you're doing on this. Really important that we get that certainty and stability around our providers. So yeah, great to see this come through. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll now move on then to our next item, which is Marywell service redesign. I see we have Teresa and Simon, just by magic, have appeared on my screen. So welcome, Teresa and Simon. I will hand over to you both to introduce this paper. If you can introduce yourself and your role at the start, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Waugh. I'm the Primary Care Development Manager for the Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership, and I'm joined this afternoon by Simon Rayner. Simon, I'll let you just pop in there.
Simon Rayner, I'm the Alcohol and Drug Partnership Lead for Aberdeen City.
Thank you. So we are the co-authors of the Marywell Service Review Report, which is being presented to the IJB today. So within the Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership Strategic Plan 2022 to 2025, the partnership have outlined the strategic intent and key focus which continues to progress the integration agenda by increasing access to community-based health and social care services, shifting the balance of care from hospital to more homely settings, and supporting our most vulnerable residents. One of the strategic priorities for the next 3 years within primary care is to create capacity for general practice and improve patient experience. You will all be aware of the ongoing sustainability challenges which are being faced in general practice. These including increasing demand and various recruitment and intention issues. The primary care team have been working with practices across the city on a refreshed sustainability study during 2022 to understand the situation in more detail and are currently prioritising plans for those practices most at risk. One of the ways in which we can address some of these challenges is through the Primary Care Improvement Plan. And as you will all know, there is a PSIP update following this report on the agenda today. In addition to this, the incidence of drug misuse, which is on the increase, colleagues in Aberdeen City Alcohol Drugs Partnership are working to reduce the use and harm from alcohol and other drugs through their delivery framework, which is also identified as a strategic priority to tackle the top preventable risk factors for poor physical and mental health, including obesity, smoking, and the use of alcohol and drugs. The Marywell Service Review Report, which is being presented today, provides an update to the IJB members on the service redesign, the progress to date, and key recommendations for consideration as we progress to the next stage. So it is recommended that IJB members today note the progress made with the redesign of the Marywell service, agree that a triage clinic is established in partnership with Aberdeen City Council at West North Street, agree that the Marywell practice is funded for 24 months via the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership as a response to the public health challenge of drug-related deaths from funds agreed by the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership and Integration Joint Board of the 7th of June 2022 meeting. Instruct the Chief Officer in consultation with the Public Health team to develop and deliver a health inequalities plan to support mainstream primary care, and also to instruct the Chief Officer to report to a meeting of the Integration Joint Board on the next phase of the redesign of the Marywell service, with a business case to outline the future provision of services within 18 months. So the project team have outlined a phased approach to improving services and reducing health inequalities. I would like to draw your attention to the following key points which are outlined in the report. So part 1 of the redesign, which starts at page 129 of your report pack. Marywell will continue to be a 2C GP practice until at least November 2024 and will continue to care for the existing patient list, who are some of the most vulnerable in our society. Marywell will have a base at the Timmer Market and will work as part of the drug treatment service until at least November 2024 to assist in the delivery of the MAT standards, that's the medication assisted treatment standards, and will specifically support the direct access prescribing. The ADP from its aligned fund of 480,000 will fund the cost of Marywell practice while it is working as part of the drug treatment service, with the Marywell budget being available to support the work outlined in part 2. And part 2, which is outlined on pages 130 and 131 of your report pack, just to highlight, during the next 24 months, we'll see the development of a number of tests of change and programmes of works to develop long-term sustainable support for mainstream primary care, and to specifically address recommendations of the Primary Care Health Inequalities Short Life Working Group. And you can see further detail on that at the end of this report at Annex A. A business case will be developed for the future provision of services aimed at supporting the most disadvantaged in Aberdeen, utilising enhanced wraparound support for primary care. And last, but by no means least, a citywide health and inequalities plan will be developed, including training and development opportunities via the establishment of a health and equality network. So as the last recommendation states, it's recommended that we will report back to the IJB within 18 months. So that would be by May 2024. So I'd like to thank you for taking the time to consider the report, information and recommendations presented to you all today. Simon and I will be happy to take any questions or queries that you may have. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Teresa. I'll open that up for any comments or questions from IJB members. Sandra.
Yeah, I read the report and was I suppose my feeling was that it was kind of a holding position of where we've been and perhaps where we want to get. Would that be fair to say? Because you know there's a lot happened in the last 2 or 3 years, and I was aware when 2C was being discussed, and I wasn't on the IJB at that time, and Marywell was part of that mix, that there were going to be issues, and that's exactly what we've come to see. I wasn't quite sure how the Afghan cohort that's mentioned in the report how that will work going forward, depending on what happens to that. And I also had a question around the people that were are in the Brentwood Hotel as well, which is quite near to the practice, and whether whether they are part of it. So I mean, I'm okay with it, I think, but I just need a bit of reassurance that things are going to be different and better joined up, I guess, is really what I'm looking for.
Thanks, Sandra. Simon's got his hand up. Simon, do you want to come in on Sandra's questions?
So I can answer a part of it, and maybe Teresa can answer the bit about the Brentwood and Afghans. But from my point of view, one of the biggest challenges in the city just now is the continuing number of drug deaths, and the government have mandated that we implement these medication-assisted treatment standards by March 2023. So for me, that's one of the biggest challenges that the city is facing. And obviously I would say that given that I'm working in the alcohol and drugs side of the business. So for me, whilst on the one hand, it is a bit of a holding position to look at broader health and inequalities, actually what we're doing is prioritising the need to reduce the harm of drugs in the city. So for me, that is what's going to be different, and that's the priority, and that's the aspiration that we want to try and achieve.
Sure. Can I just ask on that? Is that piece of work being resourced, or is it being found out of existing budgets?
Which piece of work?
When you mentioned that there was a real focus on from, or a directive from Scottish Government to really hone in on drug deaths, which we've spoken about before and all agree with, and is that being managed with more resource or just what we've already had?
Yeah, so the city's attracted several millions of additional funding into the drug treatment sector, which is why we can afford to do this project, which has I suppose, two big broad benefits: addressing the drug issue, but then also looking at the sort of longer term sustainability of health and inequalities across primary care, of which people with drug and alcohol problems will be one aspect, but also people with mental health and lots of other health conditions that then have an impact on our secondary care services, etc.
Thank you, Simon. Teresa, do you want to come in on the other point?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Chair. So just in response to your query there about the almost seeing it as a holding position, just to clarify, following the redesign of the 2C practices, as you know, Marywell was not bid for, and we set up a Marywell project team, and that was only established in May of this year. So it was just to clarify that the current work has been ongoing since May. Whilst we have made an awful lot of progress in terms of the redesign, there still is, however, a fair bit of work to go, and that's why we've outlined the recommendations within the report, and we are requesting to come back with a business case which will outline the service provision as we move forward within the next 18 months. It's a very complex, comprehensive work that we are undertaking, and obviously with the wider health inequalities agenda, we really do need to make sure that we're giving the team the adequate time to consider all of the areas that are really important. In terms of the Afghanistan asylum seekers, there are other countries who are here seeking asylum as well, just to maybe make that clear. We have, as you say, about 103 who are housed within the Brentwood Hotel at the moment. They are all registered with the Marywell practice at the moment, and they receive their healthcare through the practice at the moment. However, our aim is to, in the longer term, is to get the asylum seekers supported to register into mainstream primary care. And the reason we've not done that is just due to the number of sustainability issues that we're seeing across GP practices in the city. So we're kind of holding that group of that cohort of patients at the moment with Marywell, but the intention is to move those folks on when the time is right. Just to give you some information there.
Thank you. Thanks for those responses. John Tomlinson.
Yeah, thanks, Luan. Two questions. First one probably been answered just now. So if I'm understanding it right, this is exploring how to do things better for the client groups, and then you'll come back with something which is more of a design for the future. Okay, that's fine. So the second question is the 2024 and the funding for this. So would the funding come back into other budgets after 2024, depending on what the design is that you go for, or is there the potential for continued funding through the alcohol and drugs budget?
Simon, you want to answer John's question about the funding?
Yeah, so the plan would be to come back with something that is a plan that's sustainable for the longer term, but has involved the public, involved people who use the services, people with lived experience, which is sort of built into the MAT standards aspect of it. We have to do that, but we would do that anyway as part of good practice. And the longer term sustainability, I guess, is part of the work to scope out. There's some things that we could do because we can, use our existing resources differently. We can support staff through training, development, skill mix, etc. We don't know what the longer term funding for ADPs might be. It might be that it continues because it is such a high profile issue, or it may reduce. There are other funding streams that we might